FinCom coming to order at 7:01 on September 10. Let's go around the room to identify ourselves. You want to start, Heather?
Heather Moore, present.
Sandy Kuipers?
Dick Vandenberg.
Carol Gogolinski.
Lynn Mazzoli.
Lynn is on Zoom, and I heard from Ryan, and I haven't heard from Mike, haven't heard from Howard, but we have our quorum, so we'll get started. So Matt, can you take over the chair as we reorganize?
So as is our tradition in Douglas, some of the major boards, the most senior appointed person available provides a reorganization moment every year.
That's you, Mike.
That's me, I guess. So without further ado, I'll entertain nominations for chairman of the Finance Committee.
I nominate Dick Vandenberg.
I second that nomination.
So Sandy moves, Carol seconds. I think you say all in favor, right? Don't you? I don't think.
Are there any other nominations?
Lynn, do you have any other nominations?
Only you, Dick.
Going once, going twice, going thrice. All in favor of Mr. Vandenberg continuing as chair, please signify so by roll call vote, since you have a member on Zoom, please.
Heather Moore and I.
Aye. Oh, aye, Lynn Mazzoli.
Carol Gogolinski, aye.
Sandy Kuipers, aye.
Do I have to vote too?
No, you do not.
Okay.
The time-honored tradition of Robert's Rules, the chair
Okay.
needn't vote.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And then Sandy, are you willing to be vice chair again?
Unless there's another nomination, I'll continue as vice.
I will nominate Sandy Kuipers as vice chair.
I will second.
Second.
Okay. Second goes to Heather, Lynn.
Okay.
Okay. Discussion, anybody? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Roll call.
Oh, roll call vote, sorry. Heather?
Heather Moore and I.
Dick
Carol
Vandenberg, aye.
Gogolinski, aye. Carol Gogolinski, aye.
Lynn Mazzoli, aye.
So that motion carries. So Sandy, peace and prosperity, right?
Ditto.
Okay. All right, Matt, we have you first on the agenda for kind of where we stand financially as a town, and then any things we should be thinking about for the warrant for the special.
At a previous meeting, I think I provided a kind of a long-winded explanation of where we were. I don't think anything's changed terribly.
Okay.
We are entering a stage of due diligence with respect to the purchase of real estate with frontage on Rydell in Maine for a possible highway barn. But as I've mentioned in select board meetings, the important thing to bear in mind is that there's a meeting of the minds between the town and the likely seller. And this is a piece of property that would have value for the town regardless of how it determines to use it. So the question presented isn't to buy a piece of property for a specific purpose, to buy a piece of property that right now we have slated for a specific purpose, but we don't have a fully fleshed out building proposal yet. The proposal that will be in November will be for the purchase of the real estate. The reason why the timing can't budge is that I did not budget the full levy capacity of the town for Springtown meeting. And so when the Finance Committee, when it became your budget and you put it on and it was approved by town meeting, there was a surplus built into that budget of just about $250,000. There was also a rather large reserve set aside in an account called overlay, which is the account that we use every year to satisfy tax abatements that are awarded by the Board of Assessors. And that's either a dog or a bear, but Lynn may not be with us anymore.
I'm here.
Was that a mosquito flying by?
I don't know. I'm just standing here.
The best course of action, the most prudent course of action was to hold back a very large sum of money in the overlay because we are going to have the warehouse joining the tax levy as part of new growth this year. And we needed to budget overlay in case the developer of the warehouse were to protest the value that the assessor gave the warehouse. We don't anticipate getting any tax abatement request from CRG. They have made no indication that they contest the value. And frankly, the value came in right about where they always said it would as the developer. So I don't think there's a mismatch between the town's assessment and the expectations of the taxpayer.
When did the assessors do that?
Last December.
Okay.
So where we stand right now is I've got about 450,000 set aside in overlay that at an appropriate time in the spring, the finance director could release, actually has to release if the abatements aren't awarded. And then there's the unbudgeted budget capacity will take us to a number that may not satisfy the complete purchase price of the property, but largely, I would say the largest majority of the money being used to purchase the real estate would not require any additional,
I lost my
Right.
signal next door.
won't require the town to raise and appropriate anything additional above and beyond what was planned in the revenue budget.
Hang in there, Lynn.
So we might take the overage, whatever's above and beyond the about 700 that we have set aside or haven't raised yet, would come from free cash, and that would be how we would finance the purchase of the property. So there wouldn't be any exclusion, it wouldn't be put in any bond, there wouldn't be any need to raise additional funds.
So
That's
that-
been
well-
the plan all along.
Will there be something on the warrant in November about this?
Yes.
That's for sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it may take a very odd form, just because with a lot of properties here in Douglas, I would say almost all of them, it can be kind of difficult to get absolutely clear title without any sort of odd arrangements from back in the day when the meets and bounds were, oh, if that big tree over there to where the pig used to stand, over to where the bird used to be. And the cleanest way to extinguish all claims against title is to use eminent domain. That is a scary term for a lot of folks, myself included, because it sounds like the government is going to assert its power and take somebody's land away. But they can also be friendly. In other words, the seller agrees to a price with the town still exercises eminent domain to clean the title and to extinguish all claims against title, and yet the seller is getting what they wanted. And in this particular case, I don't want to go into great detail. I will say that the Select Board has reached a tentative agreement with the seller for a price that is in excess of the appraised value. And the adjustment was made because there are certain circumstances with the property that lend additional value. So the Select Board was willing to recommend to town meeting that the purchase be made at a price above the appraisal. So that being the case, right, it's not really a hostile situation, but as a matter of legal operation, it will give the town clean title to the land without any opportunity for dispute going forward.
So what will the warrant article actually be about then? Is it,
So if we go that route, there's going to probably be more than one warrant article, because eminent domain has to stand on its own, and then there would be a financial reckoning through Gene's office, and the exact wording would probably obviously come from town council, but how the resources would be gathered to pay for that. And then in either one of those articles, there would need to be an explicit authorization, since town meeting has the prerogative, not the select board, to either purchase or sell an interest in real property. There would have, that authorization would have to be in one of the, but I think we can put it in one of the articles. I don't think it needs to stand on its own. So there'll be a little bit of complexity around this, a certain amount of explanation. By the time, it's September now, by the time we get to November, I hope to have a lot of our due diligence done around the environmental track record of this particular piece of real estate. It's been residential, and before that it was forest. So we don't think there'll be an issue, but we'll do a 21E report. So we'll have the appraiser's report and a 21E report. We might do some additional testing just to make sure that certain things are not in the way. If all those things come back with a clean bill of health, that's how we would proceed on that article, the series of articles for the town meeting.
So 2 articles maybe?
Yeah, I'm going to put 2 placeholders in for now. The warrant is open, by the way. The select board opened the warrant last Tuesday. As far as the,
Want to welcome Howard. Thank you, Howard. We're talking about upcoming town meeting and what might some warrant articles be in November, so.
there was a small effort to make you chairman again, but it died before motions were made. So in terms of financials, again, I think I've been through this list before. I'll go through it real quick. We will have an adjustment to IT,
Oh, there's a number of,
quite a few adjustments. I'm talking about the biggest ones. The ones that cross my radar screen quite a bit. One of them is information technology. During the budget season, we didn't fully account for cost increases by Microsoft 365. And that's the world we live in right now. We no longer buy CD-ROMs and stick them in the computer. We subscribe over the internet for our services, and the cost went up by quite a bit. I think we're getting a good handle on this, but I think we will still need an allocation in the Community Development Department. You know, we have a conservation agent arrangement that is basically privatized. We hired a private firm from the outside to do the work of the conservation agent, and we have a contract in place. Most of the compensation received by that firm is through a so-called 53G account, so the applicant pays for the services of the town's conservation agent. Now, that's typical across the Commonwealth, that's how it works. But there are some things that the firm does for us that are not covered by the 53G authorization. So office work and office hours inside that are not tied to any one specific application, but have to do with the workflow of the conservation function, we are billed for those on an hourly rate, which, you know, the rate is pretty similar to a lawyer's rate, because it is a very responsible position. So we may make an adjustment there. Any other big ones come to mind, Jean?
I know there's a number of police salaries had to have an adjustment. We have some smaller ones, like weights and measures. There's some small.
Yeah, really small stuff. But the police, why was that adjusted?
I believe there was a change in their contracts, right, where the contract signed after the budget. I'm pretty sure police salaries had to have an adjustment.
Yeah, and it's complicated because there's a lot of net. We had a retirement, you know, so the replacement officer is a lot less expensive than the person retired, so there'll be some net change.
So at this point, does the warrant look like primarily the financial catching up with stuff and then the highway station, or is there highway building, or is there other
So there are a couple other things.
big ones that are coming up?
Yeah, this is also an update on how the budget's being implemented. If you recall, when John Furno was highway superintendent, Adam Furno was the working foreman, that was his title, and he was a grade below in pay, but was a managerial level salaried position. And then we had the lead man, which for the longest time was Ernie Marks, before he retired, and then the rest of the guys working in the barn. So there was this sort of 4 layers. John went over to be chief of the fire department, and Adam was promoted from working foreman to highway superintendent, and his position was not backfilled. When Ernie retired, we promoted someone to lead, but that individual doesn't have the seniority that Ernie did, so there's less salary there. We have been talking for some time in various different boards and commissions around town, including conversations with the school administration about having a facilities director who is solely responsible for the major systems of our buildings. Douglas is a small town with a lot of buildings. It becomes a capital asset management task and a half to stay on top of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, roofs, windows, electrical systems. And at this point, we are spending significant amounts of money improving the energy efficiency of our buildings and catching up on some deferred maintenance that built up over the course of a decade and a half. But we're also entering a phase where we're probably going to have to replace a number of major systems. Now, here at Town Hall, we've been able to do this in a couple of different pieces. So the rooftop HVAC units were done, you may remember this from the capital budget, so we had 4. We don't need all 4, we only replaced 2. That's more than enough for the upstairs. Here, we replaced these downstairs units with these really loud ones that are just such an amazing improvement. We went from squirrel cage to a completely different fan arrangement. It's loud as heck, but much more efficient because it's variable speed. But long story short, the view is we now spend close to $250,000 a year, for instance, on ongoing operations and maintenance of just of the air handlers in the school buildings and the town buildings. And that's a tremendous sum of money. So we need to have a well-thought-out capital plan that is done by a professional who is not only going to give us a study that sits on the shelf, but is actually going to be responsible for championing some of these projects at the capital committee and actually being the construction supervisor or owner's project manager as we go through some of these procurements. Because what I have found is that the level of specialization required to do a good job procuring these items is not something that either Adam Furno or I possess. We're not in the industry. We don't work with this stuff. There are a lot of incentives out there from National Grid for more efficient units. And we just need someone who can understand the capability requirements of the equipment that we have to make sure the replacement meets the task at hand and is also the best deal for the town, not only in the short term, what it costs to replace some of the equipment, but the long term to operate it. So the recommendation is still pending, and I'm not entirely sure where it's going to go, but I'm pretty sure that we'll be asking town meeting to create a position on the grid, which will be facilities manager. It will be the same pay grade as the former foreman at the highway department, because that would be a competitive wage for that position. That research has been done. And it's funded, because this year we funded that position. We just didn't promote anybody into it. So Adam is willing to be the highway superintendent without a working foreman under this arrangement. Because what Adam gets from this, speaking for him, I don't think I'm over my skis, is that this piece of his portfolio would be taken off of his shoulders. It's a lot to be highway superintendent and responsible for all the town's buildings on the municipal side and trying to help out when he can on the school side. It's an awful lot more work than John had when John was superintendent. John ran the highway department. He wasn't responsible for buildings. Adam was. But Adam didn't have the responsibility of the workflow of the highway department. So that's, if we share it with the schools, and one of the things I wanted to work out with the school committee and the school administration is that dotted line responsibility. It could be a real game changer for all of us, because I don't know that building maintenance is part of the core mission of a school department. The school department's mission is to educate children, which has become an increasingly complex task. And if we have someone who is an asset that we share between town and school to get really the best deal for the town, might be a very wise use of money going forward. And it doesn't have to be a position that would be funded forever. You know, frankly, we've got 3 to 5 years' worth of work here the program has to be phased in as revenue grows for the town. So that's something that I'm contemplating putting on there. I have a job description in draft form
That's for this November.
for November.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because by then, half the year will be over, so if I don't post the position until January, I've got half the year's
Yep.
salary wasn't even expended. And I think the other thing we're going to do is less about money and just more about making sure we're technically in compliance with our own bylaws. You'll recall I said that we were increasing the fire department, fire and ambulance department staff salary budget line item in order to have per diem workers fill targeted hours during the day. So we would come out to 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, 70 hours a week for the entire year. And that position, so to speak, those hours would be budgeted at the paramedic level, because what we were doing is backfilling, make sure we had paramedics on staff so that we could run ALS ambulance 24/7. I think in practice, what we found is that you can limp along that way for 6 months, 8 months or so, and now you're starting to get into territory where your per diems just can't give you that many hours. And we've hired one paramedic-only staff person, and we're thinking that we'll just hire a second. And then all 3 shifts at the fire department would have 3 people on, but 2 of them would have a paramedic only. So you would, in addition to that, we're sending people to school, sending people to the academy for their firefighter 1 and 2 training. We're also trying to support our staff getting their EMT and paramedic level certifications. So this is more of a putting people on notice that the money is in the budget already,
Yeah.
but we are probably going to look at the compensation table and be absolutely sure that people understand that there is a career path for paramedic only for 2 or 3 slots.
So Matt, as you look at the warrant for this November, is there anything particularly tricky that is going to take some maneuvering to explain to people, or?
Yeah, and it's not
No.
necessarily a financial measure, but we're trying to slow down some of the more controversial issues to build consensus. So stormwater, there's a stakeholder committee that's going to work on that, and that won't be ready until spring. We got thrown a curveball by the Commonwealth, so the governor signed a piece of legislation in middle of August called the Affordable Homes Act, or legislation with reference to the Affordable Homes Act. And contained within that bill, there were some fairly significant unilateral changes made to the state's zoning code that require all municipalities in the Commonwealth to allow accessory dwelling units, or so-called in-law apartments, in all single-family residential zones as of right. So that is a really big deal for what you can do with a piece of property now. So in Douglas, to this point, if you wanted an in-law apartment, you had to follow the in-law apartment special permit process, which required a special permit, but the special permit itself required a number of things, including attachment to the existing home, there were size limitations, and there was a certification process. Basically, the person occupying that dwelling was a blood relative of some kind. Can't do any of that anymore. So they are now allowed as of right without special permit. And there are some restrictions that will still be allowed. If you don't have a bylaw in place to accommodate these changes that have been made at the state level, you will have no regulation in place because your old bylaw has been basically stricken from the books and can't be done. So that being the situation, we are on a fast burn because when the governor signed the legislation, it was under an emergency designation, except for the ADU portion, but it was still accelerated, so it's 180 days from the date of enactment, which was August 13th. So on February 2nd, 2025, the state's new ADU law will be in place. So the only chance we will have to address the need for zoning bylaw changes will be on the November special
Oh,
town
wow.
meeting.
Okay.
So we have a draft. I've got some concerns with it. I think we're going to polish it up a little bit, but remember, our process is convoluted. So a sponsor for that bylaw change needs to go to the select board. The select board refers it to the planning board for hearing. The planning board has to issue a report which must be delivered at town meeting. So from today, September 10th, to November whatever, we've got about 2 months to pull together the bylaw. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. I think the one gate we want to close is the state law says one ADU is allowed as of right.
Right,
If you don't say that, then there could be more than one.
yeah.
So if it is the will of the town that you only want one ADU per qualified lot, you need to say that in black and white law and get it passed through the Attorney General, past town meeting through the Attorney
What the
General.
law says is only one is allowed by right, and they would have to have a special permit if they wanted to get more.
Right,
You still
but
have
if
to-
we don't have a special permit process put in place, you would open the door for the possibility that somebody would say, you don't have a special permit requirement, so I'm just going to keep building them as of right. It's tricky.
Yeah,
But nature abhors a vacuum, so if the will of the town should be voted on so that you know how to guide people with the development of their property.
So, Matt, just looking, I mean, we're not up to that on our agenda yet, but just looking at our meetings in October, where we'll have, the public hearing, public comment on stuff for the warrant, will that be ready by the end of October?
Going to have to be.
Yeah.
and they can't get it, you can't do stuff like require too much parking or anything like that.
Right.
Because they're going right after you.
Yeah. So this is basically a Cape Cod bill that turned into a monster. So,
Really.
what's that?
They've had this in Sutton now for about 10 years, and it hasn't been a problem.
Yeah, but the so-called crisis, or really is a crisis out there, because so many wealthy people have moved to those communities, and the zoning bylaws can be very restrictive, and so now the cost of housing is so expensive that most firefighters, police officers, teachers can't afford to live in the communities where they work. So they've been having this conversation probably for years now about allowing for apartments above people's garages and whatnot so that they can accommodate the need for affordable housing. The problem is it's not a one-size-fits-all. Well, what does that mean for Brookfield or for Douglas? It's not the same conversation at all, where you have 7, 8, 9, 10 acre lot.
Or Florida, Mass.
Right, or Florida, Mass. What does it matter for folks out there? So
Yeah.
it's an interesting example of
That could be a tricky
a bit of a goldfish bowl.
discussion at the
It could.
special town meeting, couldn't
It could, because I think if you're a property owner, and I have a 3-acre lot where I live, I can build an accessory dwelling unit now, I don't have to go to town hall. Because as long as I'm not affecting any of the setbacks, I just do it as of right. So I come and get my building permit.
Okay.
So it's a change, it's a real big change.
Anything
Could be,
else that
could be.
you're anticipating could be tricky for November?
I think the tricky part of that is the timing, just that because
Okay.
we were trying to slow everybody down, and here we are, we're stuck with a proposal where we have to go fast.
Yeah.
I don't think anything's going to be terribly tricky, I really don't. We will have so much more information. This is the time of year when we get bombarded with really important information. Through October, we'll certify our free cash number. We will have some sense of whether or not we've been successful with some of our economic development grant writing efforts. So that changes the pace of work on a lot of fronts. I guess the last thing I want to go over in terms of where we stand as a town, which is tricky, but I don't think it's going to be a town meeting issue, is health insurance. We've been part of this group now for 5 years, and it has been really successful for us. We invested in what was a new model at the time that we put it together, and I believe the 5 years of success are proof of concept, that the notion of individually rated municipalities self-insuring against their active claims and banding together to purchase retiree insurance and stop-loss insurance was a winner, winner, chicken dinner. Until you stop doing things that are financially prudent for the sake of politics. And the downfall of most joint purchasing efforts across the Commonwealth is what classical economists would call the free rider problem. And I'm looking at the practicing attorney because it becomes an issue when you draft these agreements to put stops in place where you can punish or deal with free riders in order to prevent them from taking advantage of everybody else. And we thought we had all those stopgaps in place with this group. Unfortunately, it's my personal opinion. I'm going to be very careful how I choose my words, because we may end up someday litigating this, so I'm going to be real careful and say that it is my sole personal opinion that the actuary who did the underwriting for this round of rate setting did not build in a mechanism for liquidating prior year deficits. So if you're one of the bigger members of the group and you had $1 million or $1.5 million deficit, his rate setting did not take that into consideration and only told the self-insured entity what they needed to raise to fund their claims for the coming year, not to pay for past deficits and this year's claims. That's a problem because we had several groups that ran deficits. And so the rates were all set for this year to end up in the high 90s for a loss ratio, or I mean, not high 90s, high 80s. But there's that past deficit. So now, in June, the group encountered a liquidity problem with its cash flow because the accumulated deficit plus the claims that were pending before stop loss but had already been paid. The sum of those two things put together, plus we had a couple of people just don't pay on time, which is really annoying, that the sum total of those three things meant that we had no money in the bank. Now, we're a huge account, right? So the financial institution, it's not like me or you bouncing a check. You get an angry phone call, you get a charge, and a charge on top of a charge for being an idiot and not balancing your checkbook. And the commercial account that's running $120, $130 million a year, that's not quite how it works. You basically have a soft credit facility until you abuse it. You just have to make sure you're coming back and getting yourself back up to positive. The group's decision has been to send out invoices to all those communities that are in deficit in an attempt to collect the amount due back to the group. The problem with that approach is that these are municipalities. So where are they supposed to come up with the money? If they don't have the money in their budget, they would have to do either a special town meeting or some other extraordinary financial maneuver in order to pay for this. I've lost all faith in the management capabilities of the chair and vice chair and our current actuary and current consultancy. And so I'm casting them out for a solution to this problem. We've got to get our money out and get ourselves out of what is basically a group that lost its way.
How many in the group, Matt?
Well, now we're up to 19 or 20. I know I've had quite a few meetings where I've been very outspoken, and I've actually reached the point where I'm tired of telling people, you know, that what's rushing towards you is the ground, guys. You know, I'm looking for blue sky and clouds. All I see is green, which means the plane isn't flying in the sky anymore. And I'm tired of saying it. And I'm at the point now where I don't go to meetings anymore because I just get so frustrated that I don't want to undermine my own credibility by being upset all the time. So I think what we've got to do here is we'll get our own money out one way or the other. We've already requested the return of our surplus. If we don't get it, we'll simply stop paying. Because the joint purchasing agreement establishes that we are individually rated and we are charged based on, if we have surplus, we can use our surplus to pay our current claims. That's a decision that the locality can make as part of the group. And that's where I'm going with it. If you can't give us a rate holiday, we'll declare it a holiday. But we're not letting you continue to hold on to $1 million while you're not collecting past due amounts from the bigger members that have more political clout. I'm just not interested in that arrangement. The learning here is that the stop gaps that are in the joint purchasing agreement need to be even stronger than the ones that we had already written in. But the proof of concept as an economic model, it is the dominant model in California. It is the dominant model in Pennsylvania. It is a dominant model in a number of other states. And we were simply trying to replicate something that has been very successful elsewhere. And we will continue to be very stubborn about it because we save our folks a ton of money. We give our employees a much stronger benefit, a meaningful benefit that we can defend at an 80-20 co-share that most of the communities, we're one of the few communities left that do 80-20. And that is a barricade worth dying on, if you ask me. That is one of our biggest accounts, and it's one of the things we have to do. Lastly, property and casualty insurance, the select board has authorized me to go out and put that back out to bid again. It's been 3 years since we last did it. It is an excruciatingly painful process, but it's how we keep our vendors on their toes is to, every 3 years, put them through this test and see if they're writing the right coverages for us and getting the right price. And we're definitely going to do that exercise again. I would not predict an outcome on that one. That's wide open. I think if everybody comes to the table in good faith and tells the truth, we get a reasonably good estimate of what it's going to cost us. One of the things that I don't like about the way we're currently purchasing property and casualty insurance is that we seem to be, for all intents and purposes, self-insured. Like, we've had some difficult claims experience, but the purpose of that form of insurance for property and casualty is so we're all in this pool together. We're all in it together, right? So when you have a bad day and everybody else comes to your rescue, and yeah, your rates will go up, but you're not expected to liquidate your own claims because that would be overly expensive. That's why the model was created in the first place. I think we've really slid back towards a model that's starting to look a lot like self-insurance, which I don't like. But that doesn't mean there's a better option out there. This is a complex thing.
Something what? Looks like something what? Drastic? I just didn't catch the word.
Self-insurance, you said.
That's what he said.
It looks like self-insurance.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you didn't hear me right, I have no idea what you're saying. Just by way of explanation, this is not one account. This is a brokered account through Maya, but they purchase some insurance and they self-insure other risks. So our injured on duty coverage is an insurance policy through a carrier. Some of our building facilities, like our boiler, That's Travelers paper. Travelers writes that and shares the risk 50% with Maya. Our cybersecurity is a self-contained insurance policy. We either qualify for it or we don't. So it's not like you have one relationship with Maya. You have a relationship with Maya, a relationship with Chubb, relationship with Travelers, relationship with the cyber insurer. And that creates the opportunity for another broker to put together a package that might be very competitive with that. And this year, just to keep the lid on things, we had to play around with deductibles a little bit. But we still, I think in the final analysis, we had a double-digit increase, which we've been having now every year for as long as I've been here. So this used to be an almost $300,000 account, now it's closer to 700. Just a lot of money. If we're going to spend that much money, we should do the research.
Everybody in the private sector will get hit the same way.
Yeah. Crushed. Workers' comp is crushing a lot of people. So that's where we're at.
Okay. Any questions for Matt, either
Yeah, I have,
general finance or the town meeting coming
I
up?
just kind of have a question about, when the state sends us back money, the cherry sheet and everything, do you think they have a problem now where they're getting themselves so much in debt with the expenses that they had not planned on?
So you see, when I launch my campaign for governor, I'll be happy to answer your question. If I did that, I'd know more about the state budget. What I'm hearing, let me put it this way, what I've heard from people who know
Yeah,
is that this current administration will be scrambling
yeah,
for economic development and other sources of revenue growth because the long-term revenue picture is grim.
yeah.
That's what I've heard.
Is it the revenue or the expense picture that's grim?
The state government buys different stuff than we do. They buy all the same stuff that we do, and then they buy a whole bunch of other stuff, which is mostly personnel for a number of significant health, safety, and welfare functions of state government. I think they're getting hammered on a number of fronts, not the least of which would be their share of Medicaid and uninsured. And then,
Len, are you there?
I think she just muted.
Okay.
That are, so it's fresh.
All right, carry on, Matt, sorry. Medicaid, et cetera.
yeah, I just, those are where the costs have exploded.
And what about the migrant crisis? That one's like huge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really privy to what they've been spending and how they've been managing the program. They are, I think, one way of looking at it, those are unanticipated expenses that are not part of the long-standing financial model to run the state. And thus, you have to find a way to pay for all that. You can't just keep doing it forever.
But the state can't print money like the Fed.
No, they can't, and they can't run a deficit. So that's what I've heard. Now, on the cherry sheet side, I mean, I think the final came out and, the administration's been committed, both the Baker administration, now the Healy administration, have been committed to unrestricted general government aid, UGA. So it keeps going up every year. It doesn't go up as fast as everything else, but it does go up. Our pilot has been going up. There's been, only because more property has been purchased by the Commonwealth. So our little slice of the pie is pretty much holding its own. And there's been some, fairly substantial increases. The Chapter 70 doesn't affect Douglas the same way as it affects everybody else, but it has gone up. So that's kind of where we are with the state. I kind of take a cautious view of this. If the state keeps sending us lots of grant money, I don't care what their problems are in Boston, as long as they keep it coming this way and we get more than our fair share, I'm fine with it. So I'll finish with this real quick. Douglas's success in economic development has attracted attention of my national professional organization, the ICMA, the International City County Managers Association. We have a national conference every year in Pittsburgh. This year it's in Pittsburgh. It's all over the country, a different place every year. This year it's Pittsburgh. And they choose 5 or 6 communities from across the United States to feature best practices in management. And Douglas was selected this year for us to tell our story about economic development and balancing
Kudos to you.
rural life with economic development. So we'll be one of 5 or 6 communities where this 6.5-minute video will play. We're going to show everybody that video Tuesday at the select board meeting. We can't post it on the internet because they want to count the number of views, so that needs to be through their YouTube account. But we're allowed to show it so that the town can see it before the rest of the country.
So if we watch the selectmen online, we can see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the video, we're going to ask the cable guys to hold the video back until Saturday
Oh, I
because that's
see.
when it'll be released in Pittsburgh. I think it came out fantastic.
Are you going to give a little speech then,
I
Matt?
give a little speech, but it's really more about
You got
the
a coat and
town.
tie somewhere?
What?
You got a coat and tie somewhere?
Hell no, I didn't wear a coat and tie for this.
Matt?
Selectman Bonin did, but I didn't. Yes, Lynn?
Will there be another opportunity besides through the selectmen's meeting to
Yes.
see that video?
So after Saturday, it will be on the ICMA TV webpage for a full year. And the-
Oh, well, okay.
And the town owns the video.
Okay, cool. Well, congratulations on being selected.
And I'm happy to say I found a way to get Carol into the film. And one of the things we were trying to do is celebrate many of those who have dedicated their whole lives to this town and making the town a better place. So a lot of the footage, I'll give you this sneak peek. You'll want to see all the different faces that show up in the video because you'll recognize them as people who've been around for a long time. I think when I added it up, there's 7, 8, 9 people who've all been involved for more than 30 years each. What that is a reservoir of 300, almost 400 years worth of collective experience. And that's why Douglas has been successful. It's got nothing to do with me or Bob and Erica. We put some frosting on what was actually already a well-constructed organization that was ready to do what it needed to do. But it's because of folks like Carol and Pam Carter and Shirley Mazinski and Mike Cahill, Ernie Marks, all these folks that have given, and there's others who've given so much of their lives to the town that the town became what it is now. And that was a way to say thank you to them, was just making sure all those cameos weren't filled by filler video, but actual people in Douglas working on their volunteer efforts and on their, so,
When you use the word frosted, I'd use the word, you managed to tie it all together.
tie it together.
I think that was more of what Bob and you did, is tie it all together. It was all out there, but it wasn't tied together.
Yeah. So we're proud of it, but that was your little,
When do you go to Pittsburgh then?
so I'm going out there Friday, and there's a continuing education portion, so I've banished myself to a classroom for 8 hours on Saturday and Sunday. So I've earned my pancakes and sausage, I guess.
It'll be
on
kind of
Monday.
fun though, Matt, right?
Yeah, well, it is. You know, I don't go to these very often. This is only the second time I've been, because it is a bit of an extension, but it's important to listen to other people from different parts of the country.
Exactly.
Just that we're all dealing with very similar problems, and sometimes it's very helpful to have a chance to share.
Can I ask another question?
Go ahead, you bet.
Regarding the health insurance, you said you had several communities that were late in paying. How many of the communities does that include?
So I can name 3 off the top of my head,
Out of the 20, right?
out of 19 or so, but the thing is, they were bigger accounts. And when you're, so I've got one thing that I've done in my background that a lot of people haven't. I've worked for a municipality in receivership. And I used to work in the private sector as a turnaround consultant with companies that were basically going bankrupt, falling apart. You look at the world completely differently when your life is based on cash flow and not your net income statement for the end of the year. Because now you're just trying to keep the lights on every day. So you do some things. You stretch out your terms of payment. If it's net 30, you pay on day 29, right? If you're trying to collect your revenue, net 30, you try to collect on day 1. You're just trying to constantly keep money in the account so that your checks will clear. I've been outspoken about this. Some of my colleagues have a bit of a chip on their shoulder about things that have been said to them, not only by me, but by other board members. But you can't go 6 months without paying
That's right.
because you have a dispute about a couple $100 on a bill. Well, that person wasn't on our census. Well, baloney, pay the rest of your bill and hold back a couple $100 and adjudicate the difficulty. Don't punish the group by holding back, so that particular account was close to $1 million a month. So they made us short $6 million. So that kind of ridiculousness, and then when we call them on it, then they get up, this is one of the, I have a household full of kids, right? Stop doing that. It's your fault. Or trying to make you feel bad for calling them out for doing it. It's like, it's not my problem, pal. You've got to get your house in order in your town hall and make sure you pay your accounts on time. Because you're not part of a group that's going to cover you. You are self-insured. Those are your claims. It's not Douglas's problem to cover your claims. I attempted to put a policy in place. The chairman wouldn't put it on the agenda. This is the kind of stupid, I'm done. I'm so cooked here. I'm like, yeah, all set. All set with that.
So Lynn, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay,
So now they've been invoiced,
It was
but after,
6 months without paying.
yeah.
yeah. Anybody else for Matt? Comments or questions? Okay, Mr. Wojcik, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So much.
Don't stay too late. You'll
Well,
miss the big show.
we're going to clip through the rest of the agenda here.
Joe,
I already said that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's getting cold outside here.
Yeah,
Does everybody have their bingo card for tonight?
yeah.
Gene, any reserve fund transfers?
No, I just want to add one more thing to the special town meeting. If you didn't mention it, that would be the Depot Street water project. Some of it's funded with opera. There will be an article on that from the water sewer department.
Okay.
For the remainder of that. That'll be big.
Can you talk for 20 more minutes about that?
No, thank you.
Oh, all right, okay, thank you.
Did you need further explanation?
No,
Okay. I'd be happy to provide it.
no,
Have you had a chance to look at the June 25 minutes, everybody?
Yes.
Any comments or questions on those?
Move to accept the June 25. We'll let Howard.
no, go ahead.
So Sandy moves
Yes.
that we accept the minutes of June 25, 2024.
Second.
Second by Heather. Any discussion? All right. Lynn, you have any questions on those minutes? Okay, we're still going to do roll call vote though, so all in favor,
Heather Moore, aye.
Howard D'Amico, aye.
Sandy Kuiper's aye.
Dick Vandenberg, aye.
Carol Goggins, aye.
Lynn Mazzulli, aye.
So that passes unanimously. Okay, thank you, everybody. Next, have you handed in your code of conduct signatures to
Yep, I
Lisa?
sent it over there
Yes.
to
Okay.
you.
Any objection to Mike Hutnack being on the Stormwater Bylaw Review Committee?
No,
No.
Any objection to that? So by consensus, we'll acknowledge Mike's interest to be on that and wish him good luck. So Gene, October 8 and October 22 are our next two meetings. Can we anticipate any discussion on any warrant articles for those two?
We should have a draft warrant for October 8th, and I will ask those that have articles to be at that meeting.
Okay. And then might we have some reserve fund transfers on either of those?
I'm hoping not. But
Okay.
we will always put that as a placeholder.
Yeah.
But I anticipate there are a number of budgets that need to be replenished or added to for the special town meeting. I try to handle them at the town meetings. So you'll see a number of budgets that will be.
So you and I can be in touch before the meetings on just what we're doing. So we aren't going to meet again in September, and then the two meetings in October, our focus will be getting ready for the special town meeting and the warrant articles. Okay?
When in September? Yeah.
Pardon me?
When is the next meeting in September?
So we're not meeting again in September.
Oh, we're not, okay, I thought we were.
You said September, you meant October.
Did I? Sorry. So we're going to meet 2 meetings in October, and we'll focus on the warrant articles for the special town meeting at those 2.
Okay, October 8th and October 22nd?
Correct.
Okay.
And then the
Not Meeting again in September?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah. And then November 18 is the special town meeting.
Okay.
So Gene and I will just be in touch on those agenda items then. Anybody else? Any comments or questions? Lynn, anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay, can we have a motion to adjourn then?
Motion to adjourn?
Sandy moves we adjourn. We need a second. Second by Lynn Mazzulli, so we need to do a roll call vote. All in favor?
Heather Moore and I.
Do we need to do a roll call?
Yes.
Because she's on Zoom.
Got it. Howard D'Amico, aye.
Sandy Kuiper's aye?
Dick Vandenberg, aye.
Carol Gogolinsky, aye?
Lynn Mazzuli, aye.
We adjourn at 7:58.
Wow.